At Christmas dinner, my sister looked right at me and said, "You really shouldn't take life advice from someone who hasn't made it yet." The table laughed. My uncle nodded. My dad smiled into his glass. I smiled too. Then I passed the bread basket like nothing had happened. What no one at that table knew, what no one in that entire room knew, was that 3 days earlier, I had wired the final installment of what had now become $68,000 directly to her university, under my name. On her behalf, she had no scholarship. She had me, and I had kept that secret for a year and a half. I want to tell you this story because I think a lot of people will recognize something in it. Not the dollar amount, necessarily, but the shape of it. The way you can give someone everything and still end up as the footnote in their story. The way silence, when you hold it long enough, stops feeling noble and starts feeling complicit. And the moment, the very specific moment, when you realize that the kindest thing you can do for someone isn't to keep catching them, it's to let them feel what the ground actually costs. Let me take you back to the phone call that started all of this. It was 2 weeks before her freshman year. My sister, I'll call her Kayla, called me in a complete panic. Her financial aid package had collapsed. She was more than $20,000 short, and she had nowhere to turn. My dad had just refinanced the house to stay afloat. My mom had cut her hours. The family had nothing left to give. I, on the other hand, had just, and I mean just, finished paying off my own student loans. I had built a small bookkeeping business from scratch. I finally had money in savings and a little room to breathe. So when she cried on the phone and said she might have to defer her entire freshman year, I made a decision, a quiet one. I called the university's billing office, gave them my information as an authorized private payer, and covered the balance. I told Kayla one thing: keep my name out of it. No announcements, no thank you posts. I didn't want our parents to feel guilty or indebted. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted her to walk through those doors in September and get the education she deserved. She did. And then the next semester came, and I covered that too, and the next. Here is where it gets complicated. Somewhere between semester 1 and semester 3, the truth quietly dissolved and something else took its place. The way Kayla started telling it, she hadn't received private family support. She had competed. She had been selected. Out of hundreds of applicants, professors had personally chosen her for a full merit scholarship, the kind you earn, the kind that validates you. At church, my parents beamed while neighbors congratulated them on raising a prodigy, and I said nothing. I told myself it didn't matter who received credit. What mattered was that she was in school, building her future. I'm not someone who needs applause. I genuinely believed I was fine with it. But here's what I didn't account for. When you let a lie live, it doesn't stay small. It grows legs. By the 3rd semester, her messages had changed tone entirely. There were no more thank yous. Instead, I'd get texts that read like calendar reminders. Hey, tuition deadline is next week. Just making sure it's handled, as if my bank account were a utility she'd enrolled in. Then one night after Christmas dinner, I walked past the guest room and heard her voice through the door. She was on the phone with a friend, and I caught just enough. My scholarship covers everything: tuition, housing. I barely stress about money. She said it so cleanly. No hesitation, no tiny pause where the guilt might live. She had told that story enough times that it had become real to her. 2 weeks after that, she called me in a completely different tone. She wanted to make sure tuition was handled. She said she couldn't risk losing her scholarship. I told her I hadn't scheduled the transfer yet. Silence. What do you mean? I said I was still thinking about it. Her voice tightened in a way I had never heard before. She reminded me about her registered classes, her housing contract, her life that was apparently contingent on me pressing a button. "You can't just decide not to," she said, twice. That stung. Not because it was rude, though it was. It stung because she was right. I had made myself so reliable and so invisible that my contribution had become something she could demand. The next morning, my mother called. Kayla had already gotten there first. She had told my mum that my business was struggling, that I might not be able to help this semester. She framed it as concern for me, but what it actually did was plant a story. One where my family would step in to protect Kayla's award, and where no one would question why the payments had stopped. I was sitting in the condo I had purchased the year prior, looking at a full client calendar, being described to my own mother as someone who was barely keeping it together. Kayla texted me an hour later. Just 4 words. "Please don't embarrass me." That was the sentence that changed everything, because I realized this had never been about tuition. It had been about who got to own the narrative of success. And she had decided that was her, built entirely on what I had quietly given her. I didn't warn her about what I was bringing. I showed up at my parents' house the next evening, carrying a plain blue folder. Inside, printed bank wire confirmations, 3 semesters of university receipts, and 2 emails from the billing office at Eastbrook, all addressed to me as the authorized payer. My mom had set out coffee. My dad was in his recliner. Kayla was at the kitchen island, phone in hand, performing indifference. My mom went first. She said Kayla had mentioned a rough patch in my business, that if I couldn't manage this semester, the family would figure something out. She didn't want Kayla to lose her award. I put the folder on the table. "What scholarship?" I asked. Kayla didn't look up. "The one I earned." I opened the folder. First receipt. Full semester, $22,400. Authorized sponsor, me. My dad leaned forward. Second receipt. Spring semester, paid in full. Third, fall again, paid in full. The room went quiet in a way that felt thick, not explosive, just heavy. My mom picked up a receipt and stared at it the way people stare at something they're hoping will change if they look long enough. Then I placed the email from the billing office on top. It confirmed in plain text that there was no institutional scholarship attached to Kayla's account. Every payment had come from a single private source. Me. My dad turned to her. "Is this true?" Kayla finally looked at me. "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Because you told them my business was failing." She said she was protecting me. From what? I asked. She didn't have an answer. My dad asked her directly, "Why did you lie about the scholarship?" Her answer came fast, too fast for something she hadn't rehearsed, because it sounds better, because people treat you differently when they think you earned something versus when they think someone handed it to you. I didn't want to be the girl whose older sister paid for everything. There it was, not a lie born from cruelty, a lie born from shame. The shame wasn't about the money, it was about the truth of how the money arrived. My mum asked the question that had been sitting in the room since I opened the folder. "Could you pay this semester yourselves?" Kayla looked at our parents. They looked at each other. No one had $68,000. I stood up, closed the folder, and said, "I'm not paying this semester. Not until we're all honest about what has actually been happening here." Kayla laughed. Short, sharp. She said I was going to ruin everything over pride. I paused at the door. "No," I said. "I'm done paying for a story that erases me." By the time I got home, I had 3 missed calls and an automated email from the university. "Outstanding balance notice, urgent." The next morning, Kayla posted a throwback photo from campus. The caption read, "Grateful for the opportunities I've earned. Hard work pays off." Comments flooded in. Scholarship queen, future executive, so proud of you. I stared at my screen for a full minute. Then my phone rang. Not Kayla's number, Eastbrook's, a woman from Student Financial Services. She said they'd received a call from my sister, asking why her sponsor hadn't processed the spring payment yet. Sponsor. She confirmed the account showed private external funding, no merit award. A balance now due in 4 days. So Kayla hadn't pushed the scholarship story with the university. She was smarter than that. The fiction only existed at home, in family conversations, and on social media, where it was safest. She showed up at my condo by noon. No invitation, no warning. You can't just blow up my life, she said the moment I opened the door. I stepped back and let her in. She paced my living room, and I watched her eyes move across the space. The hardwood floors, the framed business license by the hallway, the shelf of client recognition plaques. I was going to tell them eventually, she said. I asked her about the refund money she'd mentioned having. She told people housing and expenses were covered generously. She had spoken about financial freedom like it was a personality trait. Her face tightened. She had taken out a small private loan to cover living expenses because she had simply assumed, that I would keep paying tuition. She used the difference to keep up appearances, clothes, trips, networking events. She called them investments. The scholarship wasn't just a cover story, it was infrastructure. It made doors open that wouldn't have otherwise. By that evening, my parents had called a gathering, not just immediate family, aunts, uncles, Brian. Word travels fast when someone's education is on the line. When I walked in, the mood had shifted, defensive, tribal. Kayla had clearly framed this as a threat to her future rather than an exposure of her choices. My uncle asked me directly, "Is it true you're refusing to help her finish school?" I said, "I'm refusing to keep pretending she earned a scholarship I paid for." Kayla cut in immediately. She had never asked me to tell that story. I told her she had never asked me to stop it either. She had let me stay invisible because invisible suited her. My aunt asked how much I had actually paid. $68,000. I watched people calculate it in real time. Kayla looked cornered, not embarrassed. Cornered. There's a difference. Embarrassment includes some remorse. Being cornered is purely strategic. My dad asked her directly why she'd told them my business was failing. She finally said it plainly. Because if you thought she was struggling, you wouldn't question why she stopped sending money. That was a sentence that changed the temperature of the room. It wasn't just a lie to protect her image. It was a contingency plan. If I ever stopped, the lie would catch it. The family would absorb the question. Kayla would stay funded and unexamined. She had built her success on a foundation she didn't own, and she had built a backup for when the foundation walked away. Then Brian called me the next morning with information I hadn't expected. He had done an internship with a firm that partnered with Eastbrook on leadership programming. He had seen a draft article circulating internally, a feature piece on standout scholarship recipients. Kayla's name was in it. The funding was described as a competitive merit award from an anonymous external donor, a female entrepreneur passionate about supporting women in business. That was me, repackaged and made prestigious. Kayla hadn't just lied at the dinner table. She had let the university build a narrative around her that was headed to print. I called Eastbrook the same hour. I explained that I was the private payer, not a scholarship fund, and that I had never authorized any association with merit-based recognition. The woman on the phone paused and checked the file. Kayla had self-reported her funding as scholarship-based during a leadership interview. The article was pulled from publication by that afternoon. Kayla showed up at my door again, furious this time. You went to the university behind my back. I corrected the record, I said. She said the article would have opened doors for her. I asked her one question I had never thought to ask before. If I hadn't stepped in freshman year, what would you have done? She didn't hesitate. I would have figured it out. Maybe she would have. Maybe the version of Kayla who struggled and scraped and worked 2 campus jobs would have been someone who owned every inch of what she built. We'd never know. The tuition deadline was 48 hours away. My dad called me privately that evening. He had looked at their savings. He could co-sign a loan if needed, but it would be painful. He asked me one clear question. If she signs a written agreement and publicly corrects the scholarship story, will you pay the semester? I told him I would think about it. An hour later, Kayla posted online, grateful for family support in pursuing my education. Success is never achieved alone. It was carefully vague, no correction, a soft reframe designed to satisfy without actually admitting anything. My phone buzzed with an automated final reminder from Eastbrook, 5 p.m. Friday. On Friday morning, she emailed me a 3-page repayment agreement, professional formatting, template clean. It acknowledged every dollar I'd paid as a private family loan, repayment starting 6 months after graduation. No interest. There was no mention of telling the truth publicly. I called her. Where's the part where you correct the scholarship claim? She said the post she'd written counted. I told her that was a soft edit, not an honest correction. She said that if she admitted there was never a scholarship, everything would shift. Professors, the internship, her reputation. People would assume every other thing she'd claimed was inflated too. I said it was. Silence. At 2 in the afternoon, I drove to Eastbrook in person. I sat across from someone in student financial services and confirmed I would not be funding future semesters. I requested documentation classifying all prior payments as personal transfers, not merit awards. Then I asked what happened if the balance wasn't paid by 5. Enrollment suspended, but reinstatement was possible within 30 days if payment was secured. 30 days, I drove to my parents' house. Kayla was already there. My dad had loaned paperwork on the table. I told them what I'd learned, that she wasn't permanently expelled. She had a 30-day window to reinstate if she secured funding. Kayla stared at me. So you're really going to let it happen? I'm not paying today, I said. My dad looked at her steadily. He would not co-sign anything unless she made a direct, clear, public correction. Not a gratitude post. A statement. My mom agreed. Kayla looked at us like we had planned this together. You're all trying to humiliate me. Nobody answered. At 4:58 p.m., my phone buzzed. Payment not received. Enrollment status suspended. Kayla's face went pale in a way I hadn't seen before. Not strategic, not performative. Real fear, the kind that comes when consequences stop being abstract. She left without saying a word. That night, she deleted every post that referenced a scholarship. By the following morning, she had replaced them with something I read 3 times before I believed it. I need to correct the record. I was not on a merit scholarship. My tuition was privately funded by my sister. I allowed people to believe otherwise. That was wrong. No excuses, no explanation, just the truth, sitting there in public. The response was quieter than she'd feared. Some people unfollowed her. A few classmates asked questions. One professor emailed her to say he respected the honesty and hoped she'd carry it forward. The internship founder asked for a meeting, but didn't pull the offer. She came to my apartment that evening. No pacing this time. She sat at my kitchen table, put her phone face down, and looked at me. I messed this up, she said. Not just the story, The way I treated you. I asked her when she had decided to let it grow that far. She thought for a long time because it felt better to seem impressive than to be helped. That was the most honest thing she'd said in 3 semesters, maybe longer. We mapped it out together, a private loan for the suspended semester, reinstatement within the 30-day window, a part-time campus job to cover living expenses. She would finish the year without another dollar from me. I told her I would cover the reinstatement fee, a small amount compared to everything else. A gesture, not a rescue, she agreed. The following week, she walked into the internship founder's office and explained everything herself. No spin. He reassigned her from strategy to operations. Less title, more actual work. She took it. At home, things shifted in quiet ways. My parents stopped presenting her as a self-made scholarship success. They also stopped treating me like a reserve account they could draw from whenever things got tight. My dad thanked me, not for the money, for the line. A month later, the reinstatement confirmation email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. She forwarded it to me with a single sentence. This time, I'm actually earning it. We don't discuss the $68,000 much anymore. The repayment agreement is in my file cabinet. She started making small monthly payments as soon as her campus job started paying out. Not because the terms legally required it yet, because she wanted to. The last family dinner felt different in a way I keep thinking about. Someone asked how school was going. She said it was expensive and she was paying for it. Then she looked across the table at me and added, with some help before, not a scholarship. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved to correct her. I didn't smile to smooth anything over. I just ate my food and sat with the knowledge that the transfers were done. The truth was out, and whatever she builds from here, the grades, the reputation, the career, the story she tells about herself, it will actually be hers. For the first time, it will actually belong to her. And I think that matters more than the $68,000 ever did, because money spent on someone else's lie disappears into nothing. But money, or struggle, or effort, or hard-won experience that lives inside a true story, that compounds, that becomes character, that becomes the thing she will draw on when things get difficult again, because things always get difficult again. I don't tell this story to be praised for what I gave. I tell it because I think there are people watching this right now who are in some version of that dynamic, quietly funding something, quietly erased from a narrative, smiling at the dinner table while someone else takes credit for the life you helped build. And if that's you, I want you to know that drawing a line isn't cruelty. Letting the truth exist isn't an attack. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is stop making it easy for someone to live a lie. The folder on the table wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of respect for her and finally for myself.